All right, we should be live. SOLI Deo Gloria, welcome, welcome, beautiful soul. Thank you for joining. Recently, was asked a question about if it's common to lose everything in a spiritual awakening, and yeah, so short answer, yeah, it's common, quite common. So why does it happen? Let's talk about the metaphysics a bit, get into it, kind of what's going on with it. And in my experience, it helps to get an understanding of something's function, especially if it kind of sucks for us. And if we can understand its function for our development, then we can at least appreciate the positive component to what's occurring with us and this sort of dismantling or purification process that we end up going through. There are many different names for the process of these initiations, and many different manners that they are engaged in. And we're coming into a time now where the idea of a guru or an initiator that is in the physical flesh, as in like a human bringing one into or initiating someone into, a deeper spiritual initiation, is not really necessarily where things are headed. We've done all that, and now we're actually, what's happening is we are having sort of initiations just sort of facilitated by the Holy Spirit or the Divine Mother or our spirit guides, angelics, however we see that. And so it's sort of shifting, and it's because we're trying to establish sovereignty, and I'll touch on that a little bit. So I'm just going to go through my list, and at the end of it all, then if we do questions, please say hello, and if you have any questions or anything that you want me to touch on, or any experiences you want to share, don't hesitate. Always fun. So first I'll start with reading something. I was asking Ka, what happened when I had my Kundalini awakening, like what actually happened. And this is how Ka described it to me. God grasped you and ripped you from the sorrows of your fall from grace because you looked to the heavens and declared you were ready for love to bring you home. In this moment, the seals of your spine broke and the potentiated energy centers began to spin in a radiance. The stars themselves sang in your honor, and the light of what you are became effulgent, clear, true, and always and ever the same. One. So I thought it was a really good way to describe the Kundalini awakening that I had. And, after that point, really quickly, everything fell apart. Actually, it had already started crumbling to precipitate that point in my life. And I think that's quite typical. Stuff starts to crumble around us, or just we get so tired of something, the way that we're living, that we hit these lows and then we reach out. And that's when we have the big Kundalini awakenings, the somewhat spontaneous ones. We may not be necessarily ready for any of that stuff, or it's more of a gradual process, but it's still kind of ends up being the same thing. And when I say we lose everything, it doesn't mean that we actually lose everything. What we're losing is essentially the bondings of trauma that we have. We're losing our negative belief structures. Ultimately, there is, I just found Rudolf Steiner's work. He did a whole bunch of lectures on the Christ impulse. And so I used to call this impulse the pulse of life. And I didn't refer to its opposition, which is that, I guess, referred to as the Antichrist impulse, it seems. So I haven't read those lectures, but I put the link in the description to Rudolf Steiner's lectures on the Christ impulse. But the pulse of life is what I called it. I like the Christ impulse better. But in order for that impulse to properly guide us, to properly work through us, we essentially need to be pure in mind. And purity in mind filters down into body, as the body is manifest of the mind, right? And we end up purifying the mind. And in order to purify the mind, we have to release all of the trauma bondings. So it's any bond which could be just seen as a relationship with any concept, like not necessarily with people, concept, thought, but also with people, systems, like, or a job, business, politics. It's when we're extending something that we've bonded to out of codependent or a trauma type situation. We've bonded to it and invested our spirit into it. We've invested our love and energy into it in an unhealthy way, in order probably to avoid a burden or attempt to use the reality to fix an empty space feeling, a wounded feeling, a lack feeling of some kind, right? So those are developed from our wounds and traumas, those feelings of lack and feelings of not having what we need and things like that. So then we go and we might have a job that we believe is the correct job because it seemed to make sense to do this thing, but ultimately we don't really want it and things like that. But we feel we need to keep it. We feel that we have to do this particular thing because otherwise I won't be seen as perhaps successful by my family or something. These types of things are doing things not out of our sovereignty. We're not in alignment with sovereignty, which is essentially what's being established is the proper identity, individuated identity in its God sovereignty, or the monadic mind made into the flesh, the mind that understands its sovereignty while aligning with the Christ impulse or the pulse of life instead of the pulse of anti-life, right? Or going down that synthetic frequency of stuff that's divergent from that Christ or life impulse, or what I've seen as living light. That living light is transforming our bodies, our energy bodies, but also in our physical, our cellular bodies are activating more light as well. And this all occurs through the changes in our belief structures that are done by essentially dismantling or letting go of negative belief structures. So associated with this as well is the death of superstitious dogma. That dogma is also bonded to, made a relationship with due to trauma and basically not having a proper capacity to discern for oneself what's true and false as well, right? So essentially our immaturity, spiritual immaturity at the time, and our inability to discern positive or negative frequencies or control stuff, these things cause us to then bond to this idea or concept out of some type of fear. Perhaps even it could be even as simple as, if we don't, we won't be accepted by our peers, our family, or whatever. So we end up adhering to these belief structures almost whether we want to or not, because we're so impressionable. They linger in us in many ways, almost regardless. All of this stuff has to be cleaned up. We essentially are brainwashing ourselves back into, Jesus said, be as a child to enter the kingdom of heaven. He said something like that. So I'm paraphrasing, but he said to do that. And that's essentially what it means, coming back to a more innocent mind that isn't wounded, but has the wisdom that it's gained through its woundedness. That's part of the process. And so almost inevitably, we're going to have attachments and things that are like we've bonded to in a little bit of a way that's not aligned with our soul, our sovereignty. We're bonding to it in a way that's not healthy. We're not going to feel sustained by it enough, and it'll end. it'll just end somehow. These things. You'll find that you can't convince, like, let's say someone's making a decision and it's going to end something. You won't be able to convince them to decide otherwise. You know, you won't be able to talk your way out of it. You know, maybe, you know, the person that was talking to me about it had a YouTube channel, and their YouTube channel was just suddenly closed down, and they weren't allowed to, like, appeal it or do anything. Like, it was just off suddenly. And that's the type of thing that happens. It's like these inevitable losses of some kind. So first, I wanted to say that those losses, they seem like losses at the time when we're in the process of purging and purifying. And then we step out of that and realize that what we really did was made space for the Holy Spirit or Spirit to invest us more, to more enlighten the mind, really. That's truly what we've done. And it may apparently seem that we're losing things or losing who we are, but in truth, we're just becoming who we are truly. We're becoming more pure in ourselves. And we go through cyclings of this, usually. Cyclings of review and cataloging and letting go of some stuff. And it gets more and more apparent of what's coming to be let go of. Like, you can tell, oh, I can tell that this thing is not seeming to be in alignment. And it gets more and more nuanced as well. And it can be unsettling. It can be really unsettling. But I think part of the reason I'm making this video is because you're not alone, and there's a lot of good purpose for it. There's a lot of reasons for these things to happen. It's not like we're being punished for for being naughty or something. It's not like that. We're being actually rewarded for previous work. Like, you don't get to awaken the heart and ascend into this consciousness frequency and have the serpent connect with the divine light. The serpent doesn't get to connect with the divine light until the serpent has earned its wings, so to speak. Like, it has to earn its exaltation status as a soul, sort of. You could see it that way. It has to be of a particular quality, and it has to be ready, right? So it has to be willing, able, and ready to take on that. And there are beings that assist with the karmic load, is what happened with me. Higher density or higher vibrational light beings that assist with some of these things as well. But they're just assisters. They're not like the driving force of the evolution. They're not necessarily there to intervene on anything unless there's some type of contractual thing that's been set up that basically gives them free reign to just come in and mess about with you. That certainly happens, and we forget those contracts. But we remember them when it makes sense, when we're ready for that to make sense for us. So in my experience, it was all contractual and already sort of set up that way, and it just becomes more and more clear. But that Christ impulse awakens the soul. So inside the soul, or inside your energy systems, you could say, there's like a seed that is essentially what eventually gets watered by this impulse. Essentially, like, we have, I think Jesus referred to it as like a mustard seed, but sealed within us is this tiny, tiny speck of the Christ, we could say. And it gets seeded, and then it starts to burn and churn and all that. Gets watered, I should say. Eventually, that movement has to come up and meet and rise and meet with the exalted state. The sun is dawning, essentially, and so the light has come, and there's nothing that can be really done now. The soul's yearning overrides anything the identity thinks about what it's doing. Like everything that the identity self thinks it's like choosing and doing, it's almost like that aspect of the self that thought it was in control has to realize it's not. In order for the proper aligned sovereign identity to take root and the proper disciplining of the personality to occur, the identity self, or the Shan, has to realize that Shan is surrendered to the universe flowing with life itself. That Shan of himself doesn't do or choose any of it. He's like the motor vehicle that the spirit drives. And that's that. That's what Shan is. In order for sovereign spiritual presence to take root, there has to be a knowingness of safety. And in order for that knowingness of safety and the suffering and sorrow of life to not push against us, we have to recognize that we're not harmable by these things. If we feel threatened, then we're not in our sovereignty, basically. So we have to go through various trials of like trying to notice how we don't feel sovereign here, and how we've done this to try to feel in control of some type of thing. That's why that stuff falls away, is because we've done it to try to like control life a little bit. So it has to fall away, because our lives won't align with control mechanics that way. Like all of our, if we create stuff from the mind and then go and force ourselves sort of to do it, we'll just find things that they don't really work out properly, because we're not following that Christ or the pulse of life, the Christ impulse. We're diverging from that, thinking that the mind knows best, and we're wanting to reduce that, and we're wanting to as least painfully as possible do that. And this is a cycle that consciousness goes through, like this. It's an ascension, descension, ascension process that consciousness does on varying, evolving spheres infinitely throughout the cosmos. Right? That's what happens, this ascension and descension. And in our case, we way back like Lemuria, we essentially, you wouldn't really consider us to be complex, because we saw ourselves as primarily unified beings, like one of each other. We weren't thinking that much about things. Now, in order for us to develop and evolve, we started to develop the mind, which causes us to densify and shrink or come down into matter more, become more and more dense, and to start to forget some of the interconnected psychic type stuff. And so you can see just in our own, we mirror the same process in our life. So we densified and we got sucked all into what some people call the matrix or Maya. We get sucked all into illusion, and giving all of our power to illusion is really where the trouble is. It's the giving the power to it. You can be in the illusion all over the place, doing all sorts of things, and have all of your power here, right? So it's not about what we're doing. It's literally about our orientation to our sovereignty and our presence in ourselves. It has nothing to do with specifically what we're doing. It's our beliefs, basically. And so you see that cycle happening. And so we descend down into matter, density, confusion, hell, and then we ascend out of it. And part of that ascending out of it is we're coming up, and a lot of us, we like hang on to stuff to try to like to hang on to the reality that we don't want to let go of, because that's the reality we know. And uncertainty, humans don't do super well with uncertainty, generally speaking. It causes us fear because we've been wounded before. So we've forgotten what the ascension is, generally. And so we don't trust quite to let go of these things. So what happens is, a little heavy-handedly sometimes, the universe or spirit just sort of makes stuff happen. It just makes stuff happen for us to make sure that things go the way that they need to go. And it can be really frustrating. It can be really, really frustrating, especially for those of us like myself who are super stubborn, like stubborn-minded. I'm open-minded, but stubborn. It's weird, but... And so it's that cycling that we're doing. And so we're coming back up now. And then we do this actually back and forth then in our consciousness more. So we have an experience in the physical world. We bring it up into our higher energy centers, and we see it from a pure place. And then we come back down and then express something into this world. From that experience, we bring it here and be it, which infuses the cells with that same light that we're drawing when we're going up into those higher spheres, higher energy spheres. If that makes sense. It's kind of challenging to talk about these because we have multiple systems of the metaphysics, right? And so to talk about it in ways that people can grasp without relying on a particular system is challenging. I would probably recommend we try to stick to a particular system. If we're going a metaphysical route of learning and wanting to understand some of the mechanics, I'd look around and try to find one that resonates and stick with that one. Because if we go eclectic, we tend to just get like a whole bunch of different systems melding together. It gets a little confusing. But I'm not a teacher of that stuff. So I don't actually teach the practices too much. It's because I don't feel that I know yet. I can feel through that very good. I don't trust myself, basically. So the burdens of the mind that lead us to follow a divergent path from aligned heart's path have to be revisited as well. So like we will realize that something's not for us, we might lose it, and then a similar type of thing might show up as an opportunity for us. And we're meant to generally, in this, it's like a test, right? We're meant to notice, oh, this is like the same thing. I'm not going to get involved in it this time because I see it now. I see what it is. That helps us bring in the learning and integrate cellularly. When we make the actual physical alignment choice to go down the non-divergent path, or the path that is aligned with us in our heart, that's when we actually infuse more light into the cells. So this process is like basically very autonomous, automatic, literally just by engaging in life. So all the people that are like teaching you have to work hard, it's not like that. It's not like that. It's more about devotion, just devoting oneself to the Creator, and knowing it's a school that we're learning and we're just a student. Those two things, really. And then humbly trying to serve back, give back how we feel we can. That's all we really need to do. Like, we don't need to do yoga. Although if you love yoga, do yoga, right? You just don't need to do it to like awaken or something, or to ascend, or like you don't have to breathe funny. You don't have to do any of these things. These are just useful practices, great tools that mystics have used for years. Mystics and spiritual people and religious people as well. Prayer, all of these things are amazing. Great ways to commune with spirit and connect and ground and do all these different things. But it's not those things themselves that accomplish the integration of spirit into the cells and stuff. It's even those things could even be detrimental. Like if we're attached to yoga even in a weird, unhealthy way, that like let's say if we can't do yoga on today because our yoga gym has a rat infestation or something, I don't know, something, right? And like our whole day is ruined over it because like that's my identity. I didn't get to be myself today, basically, or something. You know, or if we're a yoga teacher and we take it to that degree and we're so excited to identify just as that, then those are areas where we might be actually confronting or pushing against our own sovereignty, as if something in the world is required for us, you know. And there, again, there's nothing wrong with loving these things and doing these things. I do a bunch of these things. I do my own sort of weird yoga. I don't know what it is. I just called it Shan yoga. But it's like, I do like weird cartwheel things sometimes and spin around and twirl and do stuff. I don't know what it is, but some type of dance. It's like a yoga dance that I do. I don't know what it is. One day I'll do a yoga dance for you guys. Oh my God, I can't even imagine doing that for anyone. But anyway, so we all have these things that we do in these practices, and they're great. But the actual transformation happens from the cleansing of the mind, primarily. Spirit cleanses the mind, and the body then has to be that which cleanses the body, as it embodies the new understanding that's been integrated. So that's why we lose stuff. So if we want to traverse this a little less turbulent, if we want to like maybe lose a little less stuff, or the things that we really love, we want to be able to keep doing them, we have to just address and look at our orientation to these things. And essentially become okay with losing them before losing them. Right? Like pretend that you lost the thing that you most want to be doing that maybe you're currently doing. Pretend that it was gone. And how does that feel? And if that feels really terrible for various reasons, then that's an area that we'd want to try and clean up, like prior to the universe needing to poke us to clean it, if that makes sense. Like we're trying to get proactive in our house cleaning of the mind, if we want. We get bugged enough by stuff. So I'm saying if you have the energy and the fuel, if you don't, like the energies now are nuts. But that's why we're talking about this, is because I feel in the collective this sorrow and hopelessness that's just running rampant right now. It's almost as if there's a portion of entities that are in the tomb or in a cocoon phase, probably about to awaken the Kundalini tomorrow. There's a good portion of souls, I think, that are doing that. And so when that happens, we have a sort of cosmic midwifery that occurs in the consciousness, where the entities that are resonating in Christ consciousness will hold space for those new beings that are birthing, to try and make the birth less violent. So, sometimes this is something that came in today, feels important to talk about, is the karmic load of emotion on the planet's really heavy, lots of sorrow here. And sometimes some beings, specifically, like this is something that a white magician would do, is attempt to take on the sorrow that isn't theirs. It has nothing to do with them. So something that, like, I worked on racism, not that I don't have anything to do with it, but I mean, I don't experience really racism in my life, is what I mean. It's not really a thing for me. But we get ourselves involved into the karmic energies, and we assist with a lot of these processes. So sometimes there's stuff there for our individual learning. Almost always there's going to be a relevance to us. That's why we're able to observe that energy, is because we have a sympathetic resonance in the soul. We've had that story before. In other words, we've tasted that meal. We get it. So we're able to go to the karma and help exalt it. So, for example, I feel this sorrow and weight and hopelessness and lack of connectedness today. And yet was able to sort of, it took me maybe 20 or 30 minutes to sit and pull it all in and raise it up. It seems like that's what I was meant to do for that portion of consciousness, because I don't think it really had anything to do with me personally. So these things happen, and so that's why I guess we're talking about this today. And those of us who are tuned into the collective in that way will feel it and maybe be aware. But many of us are doing this unconsciously as well. Like, a lot of the feeling stuff we're feeling isn't like ours. And actually, like, the feelings are generated by the identity self, using love, right? And the identity self, the persona with its opinions and beliefs, form like what we experience emotionally, if that makes sense. Not feelings of love itself pure, but the emotionality that love is like a flavor of love, right? Sometimes we don't like it, sometimes we do like it. That emotionality is never ours. It's never actually our feelings that way. Our feeling is love, just pure love. That's what we feel. But the emotionality is the identity's construction. And when we have the identity's construction and we understand that that's what it is, it's not my feelings, its feelings are visiting me. Like, I'm the one observing the feelings. When we can do that well, that's when we can start to take on some of these bigger, like, karmic opportunities for the universe to help in this birthing process. So we can hold space for the other ones who are awakening. We can't see them or whatever, or maybe we can see them. I could see a little bit, like I see lights in the sphere, sort of. And this feels like a larger wave or something. So I feel like I'm a surfer in the Scorpio hells of darkness, sort of. Death and alone and all that, all of those energies are here with us, I think, right now. So it becomes something that I think we learn doesn't have to do with the truth of our being, and so it's not as angsty. So it all really depends on our mission, and it all depends on our own purpose and how we uniquely help. So it may not be at all that magical, and it can show up in many different ways, just in little ways of being kind and stuff, right? So it doesn't have to be phenomenal, miraculous sounding. I happen to be one who can see some of the collective stuff happening a little bit psychically. I don't try to do it. I just see it or feel it or whatever. I don't know how it works. I don't really care, to be honest. But the spirit can't inhabit the corrupted parts of our mind. So we are trying to clean it all up, and that's why we lose stuff. Basically, at the very like simple parts of it. We're working a lot as well on dismantling human authorities in us, like people, when we elevate a role or people to a like an authority status, you know, we're not gonna want to keep that. Certainly there's like you know, let's say a president who has whatever human authority they have. They have authority to do things with rules in a government, right? They don't have authority over you as the being you are. They just have authority over laws and such and things, if that makes sense. So we address all of these rules of sovereignty, all of these like just ways that we're dismissing our own power, really, and dismissing our own free will as a soul, though. And that's where the distinction becomes important. Like, it's the soul's will with God, really. And then the identity is like, no, it's me. I did it. It's mine. I want to make, you know, I want to live in a log cabin, and I want to have 3 horses, and I want to have a prince ride in on a black stallion with long flowing blonde hair, chiseled. And why hasn't it come? You know, and then we get really worked up about our ideas about what things are supposed to be, but it's important. It's important. And it's frustrating. So I get it. I'm gonna jump into the chat now. Thank you guys for hanging out with me. I appreciate you so much. Hello, Theodora. Hello, Universal Spec. Hello, Lemurielin, Starseed Wannabe. Lemurielin. It's hard to say. I'm half Korean, and my yoga is very similar to yours. My Korean mom just looks the other way. Yeah, I don't do it around people. It would weird people out too much, probably, like people that know me. Hi, Amy. Amy says, your channels give me so much divine guidance during my awakening. Oh, that's great. Thank you. Some of your vids seem like they were literally meant just for me. What you're doing is changing people's lives. Thank you. Wow. Wow. High praise. Thank you. Thank you. That's great. I'm glad to help. Thank you guys. Oh, and TG agreed. You guys are amazing. Thank you. Universal Spec says same thing happened to me with the collective feeling of not fitting in, which is for sure a Maya. Of course, we all fit in. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. I think. Yeah, we dive into these karmic things. We take on different karmic stuff personally as a soul, and depending on our experience transmuting it and all that stuff, we go through it and we work through it, and then we come out to a place where we feel like, at least I've seen this anyways, where like it's like our karma, like we're seeing karma differently. It's like our karma is done, but now we want to take more on. This is what like the bodhisattva does, sort of says, I'm seeing now that I can take on much more than I was taking on. I can take on a lot more karmic work from this vantage point, and I can lighten the load, so to speak. And so a lot of people go that way. Mystics go that way, and they end up being the ones that you see just, you don't see much of them. You don't see much of them because they're busy doing other things, sitting, right? But I appreciate all your guys' kindness. You guys are awesome. Theodora says, you're amazing. I actually leveled up while listening to one of your videos. I had to pull over. Oh, wow, you're amazing. That's great. It's you know, it's you know what I'm saying already, right? You guys know everything that I'm saying. It's just remembering it together, really. And it's very exciting. It's very exciting stuff. I'm very grateful for your kindnesses, but I think you could probably tell. I'm like, oh, it's not me. It's you. It's you guys. You're the ones doing it. I'm just a speaky thing to reflect it a little bit, to help remind and help bring it to surface again. You've already probably had the thoughts, right? Yeah. And I think, the hardest things for us to lose probably are relationships, people. So I think that it becomes a really important lesson for us to understand people's sovereignty in their capacity to like there is nothing ever keeping anyone with us for any length of time. So every moment we have with another being is absolutely precious. If that makes sense. That's the view that I like to try to hold. Now, of course, like, what is this? I'm getting spammed. I try to hold that, like, in Stoicism they call it memento mori and amor fati. It's remember you die, basically, or remember we die. Remember that, and I teach that death isn't really real, but remember that we have a limited opportunity to have time with people, right? We have a limited amount of time to do that. So time is really just an opportunity. So whatever time we have with someone, it's an opportunity to connect with them. And if we can connect with them on a level of love, that's probably good, right? That's probably good. Lemuriel and Starseed says, I totally get you word for word. Yeah, that's great. I love it. Every talk I catch of yours, yes, you make sense. Great. I love it. It is hard with no one to talk to, Theodora. Theodora says, I have no one to talk to about any of this, so I really needed this, learning so much. Like you said, I already know, but it helps to hear. It makes sense, resonate. I know, yeah, I know, it's great. That's why I do it, because it's one of the most exciting things for me, probably, when I'm like just today, I was like looking up Rudolf Steiner's work, and I'm like, the Christ impulse. I started to briefly read one of the lectures, and I was like, oh, I know about this. I got really excited. I love when other consciousnesses are connected into the same wavelengths. And when I discover them, I get super excited, because it helps me realize, like, my worldview that I've formed is right. Like, it helps confirm for me, it's proof for me that I get it, I'm getting it. Like, it's making sense to me, I'm getting it a bit. And then I balance that with but I'm not really getting it that much. So I don't get too excited about it. I've only just found Rudolf Steiner. One of our wonderful community members and friend, Sarah, sent it to me. She sent me a video. I think it was Gigi Young, and Gigi was talking about him. And he's like a pretty hip cat. Aaron L. says, it feels that when I'm with anyone and everyone, like we're all one soul. It's just the stuff on top of that with our personalities that make it seem otherwise, but it's only surface differences. Yeah, it's like a membrane. It's like a membrane of consciousness. Is how I see it. Yeah, like the skin of everything, and then there's a personality over top, and then, but underneath it, there's like a unique soul that's also like a flowy connection with yours. Like it's all one thing. It's wacky. It's wacky stuff. It's wacky stuff. Look into Max Heindel if you haven't. No, I haven't. I'll write it down. Max Heindel. That sounds familiar. Oh, I'm thinking of Heimdall. the mythos, I think. Max Heindel. Yeah, it's a he did amazing work, Rudolf Steiner. I only just found out about him. I've got one of his books now and started reading it. Only just began, and already I can tell, like, this bird was cut of the same feather, or whatever the saying is. This moth is a butterfly like me, or something. But I can understand what he's seeing, and like I'm like, wow, this guy gets it, and I love that. I love that. Another good Christ consciousness teacher that I really like is Michael Murdad. He teaches out of a place called I think they're the Global Center for Christ Consciousness in Sedona is what they're called now, I believe. He's super cool. He's a Rosicrucian. Oh, okay, from the same time. Cool. That's really cool. The other thing that makes this hard, I think, too, is there's a sense of homesickness. There's a sense of like, home is not here. And I've talked about this a whole bunch on the channel. That we're trying to basically learn that the home's here, right? Home's in the heart. The kingdom's within. Know thyself. And then bring that here, right? But we struggle so much with this concept of, especially if we have vivid memories of harmony, if we have really vivid memories, or we just know the potential of harmony even. All we have to really do is know the potential of heaven and have experienced a blissful heavenly type state for a few moments even. And then the reality won't really feel like home anymore. And it never will, I don't think it ever will totally feel purely like home until we get to like a very masterful type state. So, because for it to really be totally pure and blissful like that, we have to basically not be afraid of anything. And for that to be the case, we have to have cleaned up all of our woundings. So it's a mental transformation, really, that happens to clean all that up. We end up like refining our galactic lineage as well. We'll start to feel like different energies from the cosmos. A lot of us will start to remember incarnations from Mars or Maldek maybe, or Venus. And, we start to just remember all of this. So it's important. I think that's why people like me and are on here talking about this weird stuff. It's still weird to me. That's why I call it weird stuff. It's not bad. It's just only 3 years ago, I would have been very confused by this type of content. I would have been like, this guy is nuts. That's what I would have thought a couple years ago, basically. If somebody showed me this, the fact that this is actually happening and I'm like on here talking is like still very strange to me. Manly P. Hall, yeah, he was a Mason, I believe, right? Yeah. I don't feel at home really here so much. Not fully. It's too hypocritical. I think here in the society, there's too much hypocrisy in people and in people's incongruence in the way they act and how everyone shows up. It's all a bit weird. When I'm not seeing that layer of reality, when I'm seeing a step above, then I feel like I'm at home. But I don't know how to totally do both at the same time yet. I do a pretty good job, but I'm trying to do both of those things. Bring that heavenly, it's all one thing, loving on itself experience into the everything, like buying bread at the grocery store and trying to just radiate there. I think that's where the fun stuff happens. That's where the most fun experiments I have are are just out and about doing weird stuff, playing with energy, and just seeing what happens. When we understand the sovereignty at the spirit level, like, I'm not offering anybody any type of thing that they wouldn't want, right? I'm only offering love, but I do little things to see what kind of reactions happen, and that stuff's fun. So I like that. I feel kind of at home when I'm doing that stuff, but I don't feel so much a part of it all the way I used to feel like when I'd be out doing stuff. It's more like stuff's happening, and there's just a lot of stuff happening. I don't know how to describe it. I'd love to know of my previous incarnations. Yeah, you will. You'll remember. It's like absolutely a part of the heart opening. The Akash opens. You just start to remember them. You're already playing out them in different ways in your life, and it will become apparent. So there's like usually some prerequisite stuff that like you have to get. Then you realize the Akash just opens up. Sometimes we'll like get guided to, or we'll go off to see a reader, or we'll do stuff like that. I don't tend to recommend that stuff, but if you want to, by all means. I tend to just recommend the organic way of doing it, which is just opening up the heart to like what we truly are, and trying to like lower and get rid of false fear, negative beliefs about ourselves. Whew. Basically, because our own Akash is traumatic if we're not in our sovereignty when we observe it. If that makes sense. So if you can imagine, if you had a previous incarnation that's really rough, your spirit doesn't really necessarily want you to wound yourself over a memory, right? It doesn't want you to wound yourself more by purviewing something that's going to disturb you deeply. Also, the human ego has a tendency to take past lives and like put it into the now, see it now. Oh, this my ex-husband was like the guy who murdered my family in the past, so that's why I hate him. Like that's not helpful, right? Like, so that's one of the reasons that sometimes we don't get the full picture, but we literally just start to recall. It starts to just make sense. Yeah, you probably were a Native American a couple hundred years back. Yeah, you probably were. Theodore says, I have memories of Atlantis. Before and after the destruction, I survived, woke up washed up on a shore. Yeah, I believe you. Yeah, there were multiple tribes as well, or groups, I guess, that dispersed, if I'm seeing it right. They dispersed and went places, and I would not be surprised at all if a bunch of people washed up on shores. Yeah, for sure. And yeah, the despair after there was a pole shift, if I'm not mistaken. But Aaron says, I always felt an outsider for so many reasons, but I feel like this life being on hard mode difficulty for me was to fast track and maximize all the growth. So life is much more fulfilling now. Yeah, exactly. I think we did that. I've talked about it before, but especially more advanced souls, what they do. I don't like to even make the distinction of advanced, but like there is an initiation and evolution process that occurs. There is a experiential difference, right, in souls. So many of us took on like all of this stuff. We're like, okay, I'm going to do it in this lifetime, and I'm going to do all of this stuff. And we just loaded ourselves up with stuff. Lots of us did that. Yeah. I think part of that was because literally just taking on the stuff for the planet. So some took on that stuff because of a result of their past actions, like karmically. It became an obvious requirement for them to self-correct in a next incarnation and continue. And then there were some of us that were like picking from karmic piles, you could say, of narratives that needed to be alchemized into an exalted state. Those would be the people souls that came that they didn't like grow up here necessarily. They're coming from other dimensions of space and time. So they've just taken on the story to help raise the vibration. That's what most of us that are, if you resonate as a star seed, as something like that, or a wanderer, generally speaking, that's probably what has happened. And you could have a handful or very many lives here. It could be you know, it's kind of infinite in that way. It's infinitely unique. Some of us have been doing like many incarnations. We come back here and there and pop in and out, and it's kind of wacky. It all has been in direct proportion to the calling from the sphere for entities to come and aid in its birthing into the next density of consciousness. Theodora says, "This is not my home. I don't feel and I've never felt comfortable with most people, always an outsider, never into what other people usually are, like girls, most girls my age growing up. I remember the piece." Yeah. I feel you. I feel you. Level up to love and then see it all, so as to feel more compassion for our suffering instead of more trauma. Yeah, exactly. That's basically it. Yeah, like the more peace we can hold in the face of darkness, like if we're awakening now, we've already done pretty, like, imagine just for a moment that I remember I said we descend, we fall from grace, and then we fly back up. We fall from grace and we go back up. We do this over and over again. When we fall from grace, we do stuff that, like, we get into things, right? Dark things. We do things to people. We hurt people, usually. And most of us aren't ready to know what we've done. It's sort of that simple. So it's veiled because we're not ready to get it, most of us. And if we are ready, then we will get it. And we'll get the more relating stuff. So stuff that's related to the sort of timeline that we're on right now in this incarnative experience. The ones that are very relevant to that will approach more closer. Like they're more polarized a little bit for this experience. So they're closer to you, easier to get. It all just depends on like your own development, but it's a natural process of it, is just opening it up. All right. So that's an hour. That's it for today. Thank you guys. I haven't been on for a little while because my kids all got sick with the flu, and one of them got pink eye, and I didn't get it, I don't think. Almost maybe, but I seem to avoid it so far. But I appreciate you taking your time and all your kind words. You guys I really appreciate it. Especially today was a harder day because I don't usually have those feel that big wave of energy. I don't usually feel it quite like that. So today was a heavier day in the morning for me anyway. And so it's nice to come on here and be appreciated. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much. Oh, hi Garganzul. Thanks, Dan. Love you all.